We have a double dose of Kings fan feedback, that coming up on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Well, typically, we have a special interview on Thursday of each week, but the guest that we tried to get couldn't make it today and is going to be joining us next week. But fortunately, we have a lot of emails for the fan feedback show this week. So instead of editing a bunch of them down or rushing through a bunch of them, I decided we've got enough material for 2 fan feedback shows. So why not do that? So if you send an email and you don't hear it on today's show, you will hear it on tomorrow's show. And I also kept a little extra room in case some people that typically like to email on Friday want to get those in. There's still going to be room for you guys as well. So 2 fan feedback shows this week. I don't think anyone's going to mind that. They're typically pretty popular shows. Before we get into the emails, though, I do want to continue the countdown as we've got some important things coming up here very soon on the NHL landscape. Of course, we are now, as we were recording this on Thursday night, 8 days away from the NHL draft in Los Angeles. Still haven't heard if I'm going or not. No hurry, NHL. Just need to make plans. And there are 12 days away from the start of free agency. Still nothing to report involving the Kings. But as I mentioned on our last show, the wheels are starting to turn. And I'm going to mention a couple of news items from the NHL. And I know some of you aren't interested in this, but it does give you an idea of what certain players might be worth in a trade and what certain players are getting signed for and how that can relate to what Kings players may be signed for, things like that. So the Seattle Kraken, a divisional opponent of the Kings, made a trade for Mason Marchment from the Dallas Stars. They gave up a 3rd-round pick in 2026 and a 4th-round pick in 2025. Marchment's a 30-year-old left shot, left winger. He'll give you 20 goals and 50 points per season, and he's a pretty gritty guy. And I got to say, I would not have minded at all if the Kings would have given up that price to get a guy like him, especially if the Kings don't re-sign Tanner Jeannot. He's a guy who could fill Jeannot's shoes very nicely, be a 3rd-line guy who's physical and can put the puck in the net a little bit better than Jeannot. So we'll see. Maybe if they bring back Tanner Jeannot, that's fine. But Mason Marchment is a guy who plays with an edge, and I think that's a great pickup for Seattle, unfortunately. As far as another signing that I saw today, also involving the Dallas Stars, probably not coincidentally, they trade Mason Marchment to free up some cap space, and they signed potential UFA forward Matt Duchene. He gets a 4-year deal worth $4.5 million. That is a very reasonable price for a guy who had 30 goals and 82 points last season. And strictly speaking, from the numbers, that's 9 more points than Adrian Kempe had that led the Kings last year. So $4.5 million for a guy with 82 points. I'm guessing he gave the Dallas Stars a bit of a hometown discount there because I think he could have gotten more on the open market. But Matt Duchene's a guy who has moved around a bit. Maybe he really liked it in Dallas. It's a team that's going to be very competitive, you would think, once again for a Stanley Cup. So that was his priority, and that's certainly his prerogative. But a couple of very interesting moves earlier on Thursday in the NHL. And again, we'll see if the Kings don't re-sign Tanner Jeannot. I'd been like, man, I'd give up a 3rd and 4th round pick for Mason Marchment to fill his shoes. But anyway, we shall see what happens there. All right, let us get to your emails. And we will start with Luke in Temecula. And Luke, I apologize. I kind of randomly came across your email because it was in my spam folder. I don't know why sometimes that happens, but I always try to remember every once in a while to check it and make sure that no emails kind of accidentally got put in there somehow. I didn't put it in there. But anyway, found your email. And so if you were curious why it wasn't read last week or maybe even the week before when you sent it, that was why. So anyway, Luke in Temecula says, hello, Eddie. Hello, Luke. I have a little bit of a hot take for you. which is I'd rather grab a couple of 20 goals and 20 to 30 assist players than one big name like Mitch Marner, and then fill in the holes around him. He's saying sign Marner, then you have to fill in the holes around him. You probably fit 3 to 5 players like that with the cap situation the Kings are in, and this would completely renovate our fourth line that needs help. These players would only demand like 6 to 8 million. And if you're going to go the trade route, only like 2 prospects or a second and third round pick, or a player like Jordan Spence and a late pick. What do you think of this take? Have the great rest of your day and go Kings go. And again, that was Luke in Temecula. First off, Luke, as someone who formerly worked in sports talk radio and heard a lot of hot takes, I'm going to tell you that take isn't all that hot. And I'm not saying it's not a bad email. I'm just saying when you think hot take, you think about something really outrageous or outside the box. I think your suggestion is pretty reasonable. And I would have to think that you believe that the LA Kings are close and only need tweaks, which is not an opinion that we haven't heard from people that are very important in the Kings organization, like Luke Robitaille and Ken Holland. So if in fact you think the Kings are close and you don't think they need to make a major swing at a guy like a Mitch Marner, and they only need to make some tweaks and do some ads kind of like they did a year ago, then sure, that makes sense. Spend your money elsewhere to get other assets to fill other positions rather than go out and get that big guy and then figuring out how we're going to fill holes with not a lot of money left over. So I get where you're coming from. And I think based on what we've heard that there's people in the Kings organization who feel the same way you do. We'll see. Our next email comes from Andreas. He is in Fresno. He says, I'm reaching out from your old stomping grounds, Fresno, California. Go Fresno State Bulldogs. Proud alum here. And he says, however, I'm originally from Norwalk. My question is, when will the front office and organization realize that it is no longer 2014 and ditch their boring sludge hockey system? I realize it won't happen as long as Luke and Mark are present, but hopefully Holland veers away from this system. Go Kings go. That was Andreas in Fresno. I've heard other fans complain about this from time to time, and I really do get where you're coming from. That said, I can only speak for myself in that I do not care one bit about how entertaining a style of play the LA Kings play. To me, I am entertained by winning. I am entertained by success. And if that means that their style of play isn't all that fun to watch, as you even alluded to, you said 2014, that's the last time they won the cup. Yeah, they weren't the most exciting team to watch, but guess what? The Florida Panthers aren't the most exciting team to watch either. They're a hard-hitting, grind it out, wear you down defensive team. And frankly, that's what wins. And I know people kind of complained about it even during the season about how they hated that the Kings were known for great defense. And I'm like, really? Why? I'd rather be known for being great at something than nothing. And I don't know who the most entertaining team in the NHL is to watch. I don't know, the Avalanche or the Lightning or somebody like that. Those teams lost in the first round of the playoffs. And I'm not saying that they aren't good teams. They are. But I think having a very strong defensive team is not a thing to complain about. And I get where you're coming from. I do. It's not the most fun hockey to watch night in and night out, but if it's successful, I'll be happy about it. I did have this did kind of remind me of a note that my good friend Doug the Ducks fan texted me this week. It's a good stat. The last 20 years, 6 players who have won the Selke Trophy for the best defensive forward have won the Stanley Cup the same year. Happened this year with Alexander Barkov of Florida. In that same span, the last 20 years, not one player who's won the Hart Trophy as MVP has even made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. That's pretty crazy. But I think the translation that is, right, the old cliche, defense wins championships. The better defensive team you are, the better defensive players you have, is more important than maybe having the top scorer in the league. So there's that. This comes from, I believe it's going to be Eric in Jefferson Park. It's spelled E-R-I-C-H. I guess it could be Erich, but I've never heard that before. So I'm going with Eric with an H from Jefferson Park, which I had to look it up. It's a neighborhood of South Los Angeles, the South Los Angeles region in the city of LA. So there you go. He says, I watch or listen every day. Thank you. Been listening for any news on what the Kings could be doing going forward. I agree with everything you've said about Mitch Marner and other free agents. Before you talked about Dallas being a potential trading partner for the Kings, I've heard Pittsburgh could also be one of the potential trade partners. To quote the article on NHLTradeRumors.me, just about everything that's not nailed down in Pittsburgh appears to be available. What could a trade with the Pens look like? Best wishes to the health of your family, and go Kings go. And that was, I believe, Eric with an H in Jefferson Park. Well, thank you for those wishes. Things are, we're hanging in there. We're hanging in there. I did talk about this the other day, and maybe this was before you sent the email. I don't exactly remember when you sent it, but anyway, the Penguins do have a couple of right wingers that the Kings I could see being very interested in, and Pittsburgh is looking to build for the future. Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell are two guys that could fit in nicely with the Kings. Rust is 33, had a career high 31 goals and 65 points last season. Rakell's 32, had a career high 35 goals and 70 points last season. Personally, I prefer Rust. I think he's a little more consistent over his career, where Rakell's been a bit up and down. But either of those guys, I think, could fit in very nicely with the Kings. As far as what it would take, I certainly think the Kings' first-round pick would have to be in play. I think Jordan Spence would have to be in play as well. Maybe an Alex Laferriere. Like I said, the Penguins are looking to get better for the future. They're not looking to win now. So they're looking for younger players that can help now and draft picks that could help now. All right, we still got more people wanting to check in on some offseason moves for the Kings. We'll do that next here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Well, I think I need to talk about pistachios and not Monarch Money. So, looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. With each 1 ounce serving, you get 6 grams of protein, and that gives you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you, unsaturated fats to help you feel fuller longer. It is the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether you're snacking at your desk or on a road trip or just need a quick protein boost, and if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids, whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids. Wonderful Pistachios is a snack that works as hard as you do. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. We continue with the emails. This comes from Tommy in Dallas. And I need to point out that Tommy sent this email 3 times. This was his 3rd draft of the email. And Tommy, I appreciate all the effort that went into this, and you wanted to get it just right. So I will not edit a single thing from your email. So Tommy says, I grew up in Manhattan Beach and I was a neighbor with Jamie Storr, former Kings goalie, if you don't know. But I've spent the last 2 years in Dallas. I have some thoughts on what Ken Holland should do this offseason. This will include no free agents from other teams, re-signing key players, 2 trades, and a Kempe extension. Say goodbye to draft picks for the first round, ! We're making moves to contend for the next decade. Ownership is handing out huge signing bonuses to start this contending window and keep it open long term. The salary cap is going to explode, fingers crossed. And I think these moves set up well to avoid future cap crunches. We will keep our best prospects to replenish the roster over the next 2 years, and Mark Yannetti will find diamonds in the rough over the next 4 years. Trade Moore, Spence, Turcotte, and our next 4 first-round picks to Colorado for Marty Necas and Josh Manson. Extend Necas to an 8-year, $10.5 average annual value deal. Necas plays right wing with Fiala and Byfield next year and then could move to center if Kopitar retires. Manson plays right second defense with Gavrikov. Manson is likely a 1-year rental. Trade the 2026 second and 2025 third-round picks to Tampa for Isaac Howard. You offer him max money and incentives on an entry-level contract to get him to force Tampa to trade him. They get the 2027 second if he signs elsewhere off next season, but can't trade the compensatory pick until next year. He replaces Moore on the third line. Extend Kempe, 8 years, $10 million a year. Sign the UFAs, Gavrikov, 8 years, 6.5 for 5 years. No movement clause, 24, 16, 8 teams. Kuzmenko, 1 to 3 years at 4.25. Jeannot, 1 to 2 years at 1.75. Rittich, 1 year at 1.15. And Trevor Lewis, 1 year at $775,000. Lastly, sign LaFerriere to at least 6 years and a max $5 million AAV. If Portillo, Greentree, and Krisanov are on the NHL roster to start next season, that leaves 13.65 to re-sign Clark, Manson, Hellenius, and Kopitar. I apologize for the insanely long email, and he said, and deleting and then redoing. Go Kings, go. And that was Tommy in Dallas. That is a lot to chew on, Tommy. So thank you for all of the thought that went into that and the 3 different drafts that you had of that email. Okay, let's try and get into some of this. Well, let me start with the re-signings. I think it'll take more than $6.5 million a year to get Gavrikov to come back. Jeannot made $2.6 million last year, so I don't see him taking a pay cut to stay. As a matter of fact, I know he won't take a pay cut to stay. You at least got to give him the same amount he made last year. Rittich and Lewis would definitely re-sign, but I don't know that we really want them back. And I don't know why you would sign LaFerriere for 6 years. Now, I like him a lot, and I'm usually a glasses half full kind of guy. I feel like he's going to get better and he's going to turn into a good player, but I wouldn't commit more than 3 years on a bridge deal to him. I still want to see more before I commit long-term to him. Kempe, 8 years, $10 million. I say yes to that. You talked about a trade for Dallas Howard, for Isaac Howard. For people who don't know, he's a really talented prospect. He won the Hobie Baker Award as a forward at Michigan State this year. But for whatever reason, he doesn't want to play for Tampa Bay, and they're going to have to trade him because he's not going to sign there. And if he doesn't sign, he can become an unrestricted free agent and sign to any team. So they want to look to get something from him. But a lot of teams are going to be in on him. So I don't know what it would take to get him maybe a couple of, you said a second and third round pick, I think. Maybe. The big thing that you proposed, though, was the big trade. Moore, Spence, and Turcotte, and 4 first-round picks for Marty Necas and Josh Manson. I like Marty Necas a lot. I think he'd be a great player for the Kings to get. 26 years old. He's a right-shot winger, but can also play center, as you mentioned. I just don't think the Avalanche care about getting a bunch of first-round picks. They've got McKinnon and Makar in their prime, and they're going for cups now. So, I mean, 4 first-round picks. I mean, gosh, the farm system for the Kings is pretty thin as it is. It's gonna be paper thin if we don't have a first-round pick for the next 4 years. But I get where you're coming from. But I just don't think Colorado cares about first-round picks right now. So again, a lot of moving parts. Really appreciate all of the thought that went into that. I'm not poking holes at all of it, but I think there's some of it that I don't know that I could see happening. But we'll see. As far as Marty Necas, I've heard rumors about a swap with Buffalo for JJ Peterka. We talked about Peterka on a recent episode. So that would be a heck of a deal for Colorado. I don't know what Necas's protection is as far as no trade. He certainly probably wouldn't want to go to Buffalo. But anyway, thank you, Tommy, for all of that. I appreciate that. Dario checks in from Parts Unknown. We got a lot of listeners from that place. He says, I like your podcast about Robertson. I feel like the Kings should trade for him. Talking about Jason Robertson of the Stars. He would be an upgrade over Moore. Seems like we're losing Gabby to the Rangers, so the Kings should trade for DeAndre Miller or Byram, which actually would be a downgrade, but they're big and young. If not Marner, then Besser. Resign Laffy and Tans for grit. With Marner, etc., you're looking at $30 million. With Besser, etc., 23 to 24 million. If you're willing to lose Gabby and Kuz and trade Moore and Spence plus picks, probably should consider trading Turks and Burrows. If they let Kuz and Gabby walk and do not do anything, that would be disappointing. I really like Robertson Besser. Since Marner's a playmaker, would you put him at center if Kopitar retires? Take care. And that was Dario in Parts Unknown. Yes, for sure. If Gavrikov and Kuzmenko walk and the Kings don't replace them, then that would be extremely disappointing for sure. That would be unthinkable, actually. I do think they will resign LaFerriere. I'm not sure about Jeannot. I think Jason Robertson is unlikely, but at least the Stars are willing to listen to offers, which at least that's what's the rumor out there. So the Kings should definitely look into it. I think Brock Besser, I've said it all along. I think that's the Kings' number one target. We'll see. I think Mitch Marner's going to Vegas. I've said we'll see if that happens. But you mentioned Kyle Burrows. He doesn't have any trade value. And, Turcotte is a former first-round pick. I don't know, though, that many teams are overly interested in him in a trade. As for Marner moving to center, if the Kings were to get him, I think he did play center coming up. But he's been a winger for a while in the NHL, so I wouldn't think that they would move him to center if they were to get him if Kopitar was to retire, but who knows? We shall see. Alan in Sonoma checks in. He says, yo, Eddie, every day you're here. Thank you, Alan. Did you think the Kings might make a trade for another center that is really good at dropping dimes? Maybe not a pure goal scorer, somebody that could come in at a lower price and just set up our wings. Might even take the pressure off Byfield and Kopi. I personally think Kempe and Fiala could even be more of an offensive threat than they are with more opportunities to score. Thank you again, Eddie. Love the show and your passion to get us Kings fans awesome content to listen to every day. And that was Alan in Sonoma. Thank you, Alan. I would be surprised if the Kings went out and got a center. They seem pretty set at center right now. Maybe some depth if they're not completely sold on Samuel Hellenius being ready at this point. Maybe go out and get a more experienced fourth line type of a center that you're going to actually use in the playoffs. But you've got Byfield, you've got Kopitar, you've got Deneau. Unless they could go and get a Sam Bennett, the Conn Smythe Trophy winner. I mean, he's a playoff demon. If you can get that guy, then I think you'd have to do it. And you'd have Q at the 1C, Bennett at the 2C, Kopitar at the 3C. And I guess if you keep Deneau, he would be the fourth line center, which would be a pretty darn good fourth line center. So you would be very strong up the middle in that kind of scenario. Other centers, John Tavares is out there too. I think he probably wants to stay in Toronto. Maybe a McKeel Granlund, who was pretty good as a deadline pickup for the Stars, but I think they want to re-sign him too. So I would be surprised, though, if the Kings brought in another center. We have Kings fans reacting to the result of the Stanley Cup Final. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. All right, some more emails to check in on. This comes from Peter in Vail, Colorado. He says, after watching the Panthers beat the Oilers, two things are clear. It is not simply human nature to sit back once you have a lead, and the Kings were severely outcoached in the series against Edmonton. Panthers had one game in which they relinquished a 3-goal lead, but for the most part, throughout the series, they were relentless in forechecking the Oilers in the Edmonton zone, making it difficult for 97 and 29 to generate any speed on the rush. Florida also exposed the turnover machine, that is the Edmonton defense, by hitting them at every opportunity. Florida also is not afraid to use all 6 defensemen and all 4 lines. Granted, Florida's fourth line is better than the Kings' fourth line, but I don't think that is true of their bottom 2 defense. Paul Maurice and his staff made the necessary adjustments during the series, whereas the Kings did not, because by Game 5 of the finals, Edmonton looked very ordinary. I also have to believe that Florida's coaching staff was all over their team to play as much of the game as possible in the Edmonton zone, even with a multi-goal lead. They did not sit back on their side of center and wait for the Oilers to come up the ice with a full head of steam. I think it is undeniable that Florida has a better personnel than the Kings, but there's another lesson we can take away nonetheless. Florida and Edmonton, for that matter, did not care where they finished in winning the series. The Kings are at the stage where only playoff success matters, using the regular season to test the fourth line and the bottom 2 defensemen, so you have confidence in them when the playoffs start. In fact, test multiple bottom 6 forwards and bottom 2 defensemen, so you have a plan if there's any injury. If taking those risks means you finish with 95 points instead of 105, that's fine. It's better to make the playoffs battle-tested as a wildcard team with a 23-man roster you can count on than worry about positioning in the standings. Thanks for being the most objective reporter on the Kings, as Peter in Vail, Colorado. Thank you, Peter. You and I are on the exact same page. Matter of fact, the night that the Panthers closed out the Oilers, I said almost exactly what you were talking about the mindset of the Kings and adopting that as far as what the Panthers do. And I know it's not just about that. The Panthers obviously have a very, very good roster, and they are relentless without question and very physical. But I still think part of the equation is your mindset. And the Kings need to have that mindset next season, where the regular season is about getting you ready for the playoffs. And I do have to say, for this particular season, I don't blame the Kings for caring about where they finished in the standings, because I really thought that home ice advantage, with the way the Kings played at home this year, I thought it was important for the Kings to get that. Ultimately, it didn't work out, unfortunately, but in that specific situation, I understood where the Kings were coming from. But generally speaking, going forward, I don't care where they finish, just get in and be ready for playoff hockey once you get in, and use the regular season to figure out your lineup, to trust your entire lineup, and go forward from there. I do think that is something that the Kings can take away from what the Florida Panthers did. David in La Habra says, I was incredibly disappointed with the Kings' loss yet again to the Oilers. So disappointed I had to wait until the Oilers got eliminated to email you. Today, Wednesday morning, I woke up to a beautiful Southern California morning. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and the Oilers were heading home with another cup loss. Oh, and let's not forget, Corey the Jinx Perry has now lost 5 Stanley Cup Finals. Thanks to the great podcast. And again, that was from David in La Habra. Some other Kings fans chiming in on the Oilers losing. Guy Myers, I guess it could be Guy. This is a hockey show, but I think it's Guy. Guy Myers from Parts Unknown says, it sucks to see Florida win, but it is so nice to see Edmonton lose. Go Kings, go. Ryan Kim in Moore Park said, Oilers lose, Eddie. Skinner lets in 5 goals. All is right in the world. And John in Tacoma says, my best friend is an Oilers fan originally from Edmonton. It was hard to talk to in the days after, well, you know. Well, the look on his face after Edmonton lost in the finals again, priceless. He looked like someone ran over his dog, and I loved every second of it. Oh, and Evander Kane is a female dog. He did not say female dog. He said another word. I don't know if I can say that word on the podcast. I think I can, but you know what they say, better to be safe than sorry. So to David in La Habra, Ryan in Moore Park, John in Tacoma, and all other Oilers haters, it is called Schadenfreude or Schadenfreude. I've heard both. Taking pleasure in the misery of others. Normally not a cool thing, but when it comes to sports, it can be wonderful. And I said it the other day, and I mean it. And some may disagree, and I get it if you do. But I would rather lose in the first round 4 years in a row than lose in the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row, because to go all that way and still come up short is freaking brutal. Brutal. All right. Thank you to everyone who emailed. We've got more emails coming up tomorrow. So again, if you did not hear your email read on today's show, it is coming up on tomorrow's show. And like I said, if you normally email on Friday and you want to get an email in, I did leave some room for you guys to send some extra emails in. Also, real quick, a lot of people did email me about getting about being interested in the extra content, the extra Kings content that I'm putting together. Like I said, I can't go into it on this podcast, but if you are interested in finding out more about that, you can send me an email and I'll put you on the list that you're interested in that. All right, for you everydayers, those who listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on our next show, it is part 2 of our fan feedback show. That'll be fun. And if you want to get an email in for that, you still can. LockedOnEddie@gmail.com is the email address, EDDIE. You can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section, and we would love for you to stay interactive with the show by following us on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.